We got our drinks ready.
Some good old fashions.
Yeah, they're nice. I don't know if I'd mix it with Canadian Dry again, though. It needs something slightly different, and I don't know what. Maybe just a club soda.
Yeah, because it's already fairly sweet.
Yeah. Welcome to VCR, a vintage cinema rewind. We're bringing old movies to new viewers.
Nice.
I'm super excited to discuss this movie with you. I don't think I've seen this in like 20 years, but this is one of my biggest childhood movies that really I consider to be a childhood classic that kicked off my passion for film.
Yeah, I haven't seen this since the 90s for sure. Like, it scared me as a kid, and now I kind of understand why.
Yeah.
Rewatching it was like a good throwback.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, before we get into the film, I have a couple of show notes and viewer comments that I want to bring up. So today's comment comes from Kelvin V. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. It could be Calvin, but I think it's Kelvin.
I think it's Kelvin.
I think it's Kelvin V. So Kelvin V writes, really great podcast, guys. You definitely piqued my interest, and I'm looking forward to watching The Thing. One thought I had was, could you include a comment about where we could stream these movies?
That's very practical.
Yes, Kelvin, I have
idea.
great news for you. In the previous podcast, near the end, it was almost an afterthought, but I did include that The Thing is currently streaming on Netflix. I'm gonna run through where it's streaming on the Who Is This Movie For section. In addition, if you go down into the show notes, every week I'm going to include a link in the description to justwatch.com/ca for our Canadian viewers. And that website will show you where you can find the specific movies we're discussing and where they're streaming. You can also search movies that are streaming on your own subscribed platforms. You can actually select like the specific ones you're streaming. They have like 30 different platforms on there, which is crazy to know that there are even that many at this point. The other thing that's really cool about Just Watch is you can filter movies and TV shows using a number of other filters like genre, year it was released, rating, etc. I actually find that it's easier to find movies on there than trying to use the Amazon Prime interface. That interface is garbage.
It is the absolute worst. I don't know how this huge company is running that as their main movie platform.
Yeah, it's awful. So anyway, Kelvin, I hope that answered your question. You rock, buddy. All right, let's introduce the movie for this week. We're doing E.T. the Extra-Terrestrial. This is a childhood classic, came out in 1982, Steven Spielberg directing. I'll tell you about some of the other famous childhood actors that were involved in this as well. It's a sci-fi children's movie, essentially.
It's a very great introduction to this for the kids of the 90s.
Oh, absolutely. Even the 80s, really. This movie came out in 82. And I'm going to tell you some crazy facts about when it came out at that point a little later, too.
Yeah, it was a great year. I haven't watched this since the 90s. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, I probably haven't watched this movie in at least 20 years as well. I was trying to think back, and absolute last time I watched, I was probably at most 10 years old, I think.
And it scared the shit out of me.
There are some dark moments, absolutely. And yeah, we'll have to talk about that in a sec here. So we're going to start actually this time with Who Is This Movie For? So I actually want to start this segment with a two-part question for you. So the first part I want to ask you, and I want your opinion on this. Is this a movie for children? And at what age is it for?
I would say at least 10 or 11. That's a decent age to be introducing this. It gets into some darker areas, but you should be at least 10 or 11. I think I was too young, and I think you were too young when we watched it in the 90s. But it was different back then.
Yeah, so I had to actually look this up afterwards. This movie does have a PG rating, so 8 and up. I think I probably started watching this movie around 5 or 6 years old.
Yeah.
And there's some really dark moments that we'll get into a little bit later in this film. But in my opinion, those moments make the payoff of the ending so much more rewarding. In my opinion, I think this is a film for children. You have to gauge your child's kind of level of dealing with dark and death and stuff like that. And realistically, you're probably going to have to do a little hand-holding through this film too.
Yeah, like I feel like when I watched this, it was my very first Alien movie, and I had like it just scared the crap out of me. Yeah, I feel like movies like Men in Black and things like and like Lilo and Stitch, those kinds of movies, if your kid has watched those, then they're probably ready for this. They've got the concept, they're not going to get too scared.
Yeah, you definitely have to gauge your kids, but I think that any children who are prepared to deal with some of those tougher moments, and as long as you know when those tough moments are coming, you might have to watch this movie before showing your kids. But this is my childhood movie. I know for a fact that there were moments as a kid that scared me, and so this is a movie that I shared with my grandma, and that I have a kind of a special connection with her, and this was her favorite movie of all time. So she showed me this movie from probably too young of an age, but we watched this movie over and over and over again, and it still scared me in those bits. But she kind of walked me through it and said, it's going to be okay, and all of that sort of stuff. But on the opposite end of the spectrum, similar to your experience, Jess watched this as a kid as well, and it terrified her.
Yeah.
And she thought, and realistically, I could see that. Like, E.T. is not an aesthetically pleasing looking alien by any means.
It's very unique.
Yeah.
Like, they just came out of the park with this crazy, like, looking alien, but they also, like, made it pretty lovable at the same time.
Exactly.
Did you have a second question?
Yes, I did have a second question. The second question is this a movie for adults?
Definitely, especially if you have that traumatic memory as a kid of watching this and haven't watched it since. It's definitely rewatchable and very like heartwarming and fun overall.
Yeah, for sure. And Jess was not looking forward to watching this, but her final comment in this film was, this really brings back the authentic feeling of being a kid again. And I can't agree with her more. Like, this film feels like childhood, and that is honestly the best way I can describe it.
Yeah, like you have to overindulge in some like snacks like you were a kid, like maybe to the point where you throw up, and maybe that's what I did, maybe it's not. Very, very good rewatch.
Very good rewatch. All right, so second part of who is this movie for? When do you think is the perfect time to watch this film?
Just really any night where you're just like hanging out with your significant other or like an old friend. Like it's like a very like comforting kind of movie, even though it has those like stranger aspects.
Yeah, for me, I think this is a perfect Sunday night family kind of film.
Oh, yeah.
You know, when we were growing up, how they used to play movies on Sunday nights? I think it was on like CBC or CBS or something like that.
Yeah.
So every Sunday at my house, we would get together and everyone would kind of stop doing what they were doing and watch whatever was playing on TV at that point in time. And I think this is a perfect movie for that kind of situation and kind of getting the whole family together to watch something.
Yeah, that's definitely a great way to do it.
So this film is streaming currently on Prime. Again, if you need to look later, if you're watching this at a later point in time, go down to the link in the description below and you'll be able to find where to stream this. So let's talk about the plot a little bit. Jason?
All right, so E.T. gets going when a bunch of very strange looking aliens come to Earth to collect plant samples. Some menacing agents scare them off, but in a rush, they leave one of their more curious aliens behind. That little guy hides out in the shed of a 10-year-old kid who, upon discovery, lures the alien back to his house with Reese's Pieces, and no one believes him when he tries to tell his friends and family. They bond, find out some of E.T.'s powers, teach him to talk, then work out a way to get him home.
Yeah, and I kind of get the vibes that E.T. is also a child in this, and so it's kind of E.T. and Elliot kind of bonding a little bit as well as children. And this is kind of before any prejudices or anything else have developed. So there's that childhood innocence, which we'll talk about a little bit later as well. That's kind of helps form that bond between the two of them, and I think that's really important to the plot.
It's either that or the bond itself, because the bond is an important thing. The bond makes E.T. a little bit more childlike, even though he is still shown to be very intelligent.
That's a good point, actually. Yeah.
Which way does it go?
Yeah.
Is it because he bonds with a kid, or is it because he is also like that age of an alien?
Yeah, for sure. That bond is extremely important, and that I don't want to spoil too much about that bond at this point in time, because there's some really comical moments that come about because of that bond. It's more than just a normal bond. Like, this is a supernatural bond, to say the least.
Definitely.
So let's get into some characters and people you may know. First, we have to start with Elliot, the main character. He's the middle child, 10 years old. He's probably the most wayward with the absence of his father. We don't really see him with a group of friends ever or anything like that. And he's the original one to discover E.T. in the backyard and form that bond.
And that moment when he is looking into the shed was just like perfect cinematic. Like all the lighting and everything, the curiosity was just spiked right at that moment.
Everything about that scene is perfect in my mind. And for probably about the next 10 to 15 minutes after, as they kind of bounce off each other a little bit, that's one thing that I actually wrote about that was a memorable scene for me in several spots. And it goes back to this movie being childhood. Like when E.T. comes out of the shed for the first time and Elliot's sitting on the chair and he's doing that silent scream to try to get his family.
Yeah.
I could identify with that so hard. I remember specific instances in my childhood where I was so scared that that's the absolute most I would get out.
His whole character, him being the younger brother, I connected to a lot in the intro. Like he's like trying to get a word in while his older brother's friends are all like hanging out, and he's just like trying to figure out how he can like be a part of the older brother's like life kind of, and the conversation.
And it's interesting, actually. You bring up a good point here. So you identified with Elliot being the middle child to an older brother. I identified with Elliot being the middle child to a younger sister because I had a younger sister growing up. So that cool. kind of dynamic is where I kind of related to, and kind of having that annoying younger sister who objectively... Drew Barrymore, super cute,
oh my God.
Scene
like,
stealer in this film.
Every word that she uttered was just like I wanted to hug her.
Absolutely, and every comment was just so funny, so perfectly timed. So I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit here, but yes, Drew Barrymore plays Gertie, Elliot's younger sister. And again, she has some of the funniest lines in the movie. Like, at one point, she betrays her brothers to introduce E.T. to the mother. So they walk in the door, and E.T. is hanging out in the living room. And Gertie goes, "Here he is." And the mom goes, "Here's who," because she's not paying any attention. And she opens the fridge door as E.T.'s walking up to them and just absolutely smokes him with the fridge door. And Gertie goes, "The man from the moon, but I think you killed him already."
Yeah, that was a great scene. And her lines are the best. Gertie is like by far the best character of this movie, I would say.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't think as a kid I would have agreed with you, but
Yeah,
now
yeah,
as an adult, absolutely seen Steeler favorite
yeah.
character. So, Elliot, I'm going to move back for a sec. Elliot's played by Henry Thomas, and you may know Henry Thomas from, and again, we do people that you may know from the 2000s and what roles they had. So recently, he's been involved in Midnight Mass, which was just released on Netflix really recently. He's Ed Flynn, the kind of the main family, the father of that. He's also in The Haunting of Hill House, which I just started actually, and he plays a young Hugh Crane, which is again the father of the story. And then he also again plays The Haunting of Bly Manor. So he's kind of become a main actor under the director Mike Flanagan, who's known for horror and kind of having a very Stephen King-esque appeal, and his films draw and TV shows draw a lot of inspiration from Stephen King type novels. So if you're into that and you've seen some of those, this is actually one of Henry Thomas's first films, and probably the one he's most known for, to be honest.
Yeah, that's fair.
So Drew Barrymore, we don't even need to get into it. Everyone knows who Drew Barrymore. She's probably one of the most famous actors of the 80s through early 2000s. And even recently she's been in the Santa Clarita Diet, Grey Gardens, He's Just Not That Into You, 50 First Dates getting a little bit further out, and then Charlie's Angels, the reboot. So some other important characters that you should know. So we already mentioned Elliot's older brother. His name's Michael. He kind of looks down on Elliot to begin with as kind of the weirdo of the family, but eventually they kind of connect over E.T., and he takes on more of a protector role with Elliot as the film kind of goes on.
Yeah, like you could see him mature from just being like not really a bully, but just an older brother, and then he matures into like a helpful, nicer older brother.
Yeah. And so the last part of the family that I want to talk about is the mom. So she's raising these three kids on her own, and the husband here is out of the picture. He's gone into the world with some side girl kind of thing. And she's kind of left to raise these kids by herself. And this was actually something as a kid that I don't think I really picked up on, or it really wasn't something that important to me necessarily. But I think as an adult, I can maybe sympathize or empathize with the mother a little bit more.
Oh yeah, like you barely paid attention to her as a kid because she was not super central to the movie anyways, but all the elements that you see as an adult, like all the things going on in her life, definitely like you notice it more and you like appreciate it.
Yeah, and I think with her as well, I think a lot of critics could say that, this is one of those tropes where the adult's not really paying attention. But I think I kind of disagree with that in that film. Like, that really shows that she has just so much going on. She's trying to take care of these three kids and work and all of this other stuff. And being an adult now, I can kind of understand having all these things going on in my life that it's hard to really focus on one thing and how you're going to miss these details, especially even with your kids and trying to raise them as a single mother.
Yeah, like she has an alien in her house and she doesn't notice even when it's right in front of her for like the majority of the movie.
Right. So there's two other figures that I want to bring up. Keyes is the mysterious figure hunting E.T. and his family. I don't think we actually get more than a name than that, but Steven Spielberg really like hones in on the keychain that this guy is wearing all the time. I don't love that, to be honest. It's a lot of crotch shots.
That's exactly what Annabelle said. Like, I don't know if she noticed the keys. She's like, what's up with all the crotch shots?
Yeah, they were really focusing on the keys
Which
there.
were hanging off his belt.
Yeah.
and he was one of the guys chasing ET at the very beginning, and the reason why like his spaceship left without.
Yeah, exactly. So he's really central to the story, but and I feel like maybe Steven Spielberg was trying to do something a little bit different here, because at this point the hat's probably been done a million times and stuff like that. But I don't know. I think trying to do something different didn't really work for me. That's one small thing that didn't work for me. So the last kind of actor to note, not a central character, but I do a deep dive into the actors, see if anybody kind of had any notable appearances later on. C. Thomas Howell is the name of the actor. He plays one of Michael's friends, one of the guys on the bikes in one of the ending scenes.
Oh, yeah.
He's been in tons of appearances since the 2000s on TV appearances. The notable part, and this is a little bit more me bias, and this is also, pre-2000s as well, so all you new viewers, but he plays Ponyboy Curtis in The Outsiders.
Oh, yeah. Shit.
This was his first role, immediately after goes to The Outsiders.
That is unreal. That's like such good luck as a child actor.
Absolutely.
E.T. to The Outsiders. That's great.
And this was kind of one of the things while I was watching. I kind of try to pay attention to the actors, because this took part like 40 years ago, to see if there was anybody that looked familiar. And I did think that one of Michael's friends did look familiar to me. And so I had a good chuckle to myself when I realized that it was Ponyboy Curtis, because The Outsiders, again, was really important to my high school years, actually, or my pre-high school years.
Yeah, yeah. One thing to note, going back to Elliot's older brother, he actually won Best Supporting Actor award for this movie.
Oh, wow. Yeah, this movie actually won a ton of awards. Oscar awards and Grammy awards and every other award ceremony that you could name under the sun. It did lose Best Picture to, I believe, Gandhi that year. And the director of Gandhi said that he didn't think his movie should have beaten E.T. He said that during the acceptance of the award.
What a humble man.
Yes.
One other note that I had, you said you were like looking out for people that you might recognize. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of mustaches that reminded me of some porn guys. Not that I view those kinds of movies. I like old regular movies. But
not that there's anything wrong with that.
They just had some great stashes. Like it was just at the like the end of the stash era, I want to say, or like right in the middle. And
I don't know. I think it's probably right in the middle. Like my dad would have been just getting into in his adulthood around this time, and that's when him and all of his buddies would have started growing the stashes that they'd have for the next like 20, 30 years, basically.
They were just thick.
Yeah, they were. I don't even know how they could grow them that thick. Like, I'm almost 30 years old, and I can't grow mine that thick.
Things were different back then.
All right, last person I want to quickly mention, Steven Spielberg directing here. This is one of his most iconic films in a career that includes Indiana Jones, Schindler's List, Saving Private Ryan, Jurassic Park, Jaws. I can go on for another 2 minutes probably of his notable movies. But this film was one of the highest grossing films that he ever put out. At the time, highest grossing film of all time, wasn't surpassed until over 10 years later, with the release of another Steven Spielberg film, Jurassic Park.
Up until E.T. came out, what was the highest grossing movie? Because it eclipsed the previous one by like far.
Surpassed Star Wars as the highest grossing film. There we go.
Yes, like Star Wars, absolutely huge, and then E.T., like they're both kind of kids movies, but E.T. just like came out of nowhere with just like huge success.
Yeah, and funny enough, let's talk about this really quickly as well. There's a lot of Star Wars references in this as
Yes.
well. And that's because Steven Spielberg and George Lucas were friends. They had some friendly bets prior to this movie between some bets, which are really interesting. We'll
Yeah.
talk about those when we get to those movies eventually on this podcast. Yeah, so E.T., there's a point in time where Elliot's showing all of the important things to E.T., or the things that he finds important, and he's showing him like his Lando Calrissian doll and
Yeah.
stuff like that. Later in the film, we see during Halloween, we see Yoda walking around, and E.T. actually tries to go to him and
Yeah.
speak to him,
Yeah.
which is really awesome.
Yeah, like that tiny little like connection where he's like, "Oh, I know that guy."
Yeah, exactly. And then later on, about almost 20 years later, E.T.'s family makes an appearance, or E.T.'s species makes an appearance in the Star Wars reboot, episodes 1 through 3. I believe he was in the first one, and it's during, I believe, the galactic kind of political meeting that as they're panning through all of the aliens, you see the ET type of species.
Yeah, that was really cool to see. Like the mask that was used in ET, the Yoda mask. Like I want to say it was an actual like from the movie mask. It was very realistic.
It was super realistic, and I don't know if we could even find an answer to that, but yeah, you might not be wrong. I imagine this is probably the same studio that released Star Wars.
Yeah, that might be a good thing for us to follow up on at some point.
Yeah,
Or
for
just
sure.
look up.
For sure. All right, let's quickly talk themes a little bit. So, obviously, childhood and innocence a little bit in this and trying to fit in. Like I've said before, this film is childhood. This film it'll put you back to a point in your life where everything is still magic, basically. And I got really sentimental, and I actually got emotional twice in this film, funny enough. And I want to wait till spoilers to talk about those brief moments. But this film was written out of a place in Steven Spielberg's heart as well. This is kind of in reference to him going through his parents' divorce as a child. So,
Yeah, I feel like they really like play into like they do a good job of explaining, well, like showing without explaining that feeling as a kid. So that's a really cool theme. Like it could be another thing that might be good to watch for someone who's gone through that, just to work through maybe or think about.
and Elliot is the one who's most struggling with the loss of his father in his life. And so that's kind of hits home a little bit. The other interesting thing in this film is there's a lot of references to Peter Pan and the Lost Boys. They actually, in the scene where the mom is reading a novel to Gertie, that is Peter
Yeah,
Pan.
yeah. I checked which book that was, and yeah, that was like a really cool reference.
So you can there's kind of a direct correlation here, and there's a little bit of a modern retelling of E.T. kind of being Peter Pan and bringing Elliot along on this grand adventure with him.
Yeah, that's cool.
I also think a little bit as an adult, there's a theme of that struggle of just trying to do it all yourself kind of thing and trying to figure it out, basically.
Yeah, like going with the flow while trying to get as many things as you can together and like going in a good direction, and you're just kind of like it's like you're juggling everything at once.
Yeah, and just having that kind of unfocus as you get through things. That's something that's kind of I've maybe been struggling a little bit with lately. Is just I have so much going on, and it's really hard to focus on certain particular things in my life a little bit right now.
Yeah.
So it's hectic kind of thing, and that's something that as a kid you're not gonna notice, but as an adult it kind of hits home a little bit more.
Yeah, you see that in the rewatch as an adult for sure. So basically, another theme is the experience of like seeing an actual benevolent experience around aliens.
Hmm.
So the alien itself is benevolent, and you kind of find out later that the agency that is trying to go after ET, the head guy of it isn't actually a bad guy. So like it's kind of nice, this childhood wonder of protecting innocence. Like
Hmm.
the agency was protecting Elliot's innocence to the best of its ability while also trying to do the right thing. So that's like a whole theme where everyone's kind of good in it. It's not that evil in the end. There are some aspects of it, but
Yeah, no, I would agree with you. It's definitely the agency is definitely built up to be the villain for a while, but they do try to do what's right. Now, you could argue though during that final chase scene where they're trying to not let them escape, basically, and
yeah.
that
But
that
it shows like there are good people within those agencies, like,
yes,
and like you should be wary, but there are good people. So
yeah,
that's kind of like a good theme to teach kids, kind of compared to other movies that they see. Like there is a good guy in the end.
yeah, and it's not just anti authority,
Yeah.
right? Okay, let's move into score, and I'm really excited to talk about this. So this film was composed, or the score to this film was composed by John Williams. He won,
Amazing.
uh, I believe it was 5 Oscars over the course of his film career, and one of those was for this film for best score. And so he's one of the most famous film and TV composers of all time. So he composed a lot of Steven Spielberg's other films like Jaws and Indiana Jones, which, funny enough, in my notes here as I was watching, when that first opening score comes in, I wrote down, is this the guy who did it, Indiana Jones?
And I was automatically writing down Harry Potter.
Yes, and that's the fun part that I was getting to. So those of you who grew up in the universe of Harry Potter books and films, the main theme song of Harry Potter that goes da 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 da,
Mm,
which
yeah.
is like the maybe the most notable song of all time
Yeah.
at this point, was scored by John Williams. That's actually Hedwig's theme is what it's called. And like I said, it's got to be the most recognizable theme for anyone under the age of 40.
You definitely get the vibes in ET, but like you as soon as you hear the ET theme song or the intro music, yeah, you automatically, I thought Harry Potter, you thought Indiana Jones. Depends on I guess what you're more attached to, maybe.
Yeah. And honestly, I don't think this film score is that much below like an Indiana Jones or a Harry Potter. The only difference is that E.T. really didn't develop into its own E.T. universe. So
Yeah.
this is really the only film where this score actually took place. And I'm going to get into that why that didn't kind of pan out in sequels, prequels, and reboots. So I think if we had heard this score a little bit more in a few other films, then it would have maybe not quite gone to the same level as Indiana Jones and Harry Potter, but it's pretty damn close.
Yeah, yeah, like it's almost there.
And so something that I want to say personally about the score is I think that this film and other films in general are better for having a professional composer come in and score based on the feelings and the themes and the plot of the film rather than selecting music of the time period. I
Yeah.
think it kind of creates this timeless score that you can't really tie down to a specific generation of when it was made. And I kind of want to kind of compare this a little bit to Hans Zimmer scoring Chris Nolan movies. Those films are timeless classics and they're not even 20 years old
Yeah,
yet, most
yeah.
of them. And part of the reason for that is because this Hans Zimmer scores will never get old, in my opinion.
He's like at the same plane as John Williams, just a whole different feel, and he mastered that feel the way John Williams has mastered this amazing awe-filled type of experience and with emotions packed in.
Exactly. And that's actually, I did a deeper dive into this because I found this really interesting, and especially because of this film. And so there's actually a lot of thought that goes into composing a score like this for a film. They thought about how they were going to generate sympathy for E.T.'s look, because John Williams got to see E.T. before he composed this, and he was like, what the hell is this alien kind of thing.
They did such an amazing job with how gross and like weird he looked, and yet at the end I want to give him a hug too.
Yep.
Or just touch his head very awkwardly like the older brother. Everyone wants to touch his head. I'm glad someone did it.
Yeah, true. And the other kind of component to this is the mixing and the emphasizing of different instruments at different times to kind of elicit those different feelings from the audience, and when you want to elicit that feelings. It's really manipulative and interesting.
And like you get so into the movie that you hardly notice, like unless you're paying attention and like hearing those things, and like you're used to kind of watching out for those. Like you're just like completely in it. Like your heart is now like beating with the movie as it's going.
Yeah, exactly. So this music was composed before the film final edit was complete. So Steven Spielberg loved the music so much that they actually edited the final chase scene to match the song exactly.
Wow, that's unreal.
So incredible, so interesting.
And that's why he's so great at like directing.
Yeah, and just
producing.
Everything came together for this film, right?
Yeah.
Let's move into effects and filming here. I don't have too much to talk about, so we'll kind of talk about this pretty quickly, I think. The first part that I wanted to bring up that I found was really interesting. E.T. was voiced by a woman named Pat Welsh. She actually smoked 2 packs a day to kind of nail down the voice during
For
this
how
time.
long? Because it seems like you would have to do that for 40 years. I think she might have been just using it as an excuse.
Yeah, that's
I
a good
had
point.
to do it for E.T. What? Like, when did she start?
When did she stop? I don't know.
She's still going today.
She's still going today. But yeah, and they also used a number of other audio bits like different animals, different instruments, etc. to kind of create that voice. But the bass was this woman, this chain-smoking woman. The other interesting component here is, again, 1982, we're pre-CGI. The alien E.T. is there with the kids during the whole filming. It's actually 3 different puppets, and each of those puppets kind of serve a bit of a different purpose, with maybe some head movements, some walking around, and different kind of actions. There was also 3 different actors that kind of helped use the different motions and use the different puppets, basically. And all 3 of them were inside of E.T. There was 2 little people.
No way.
Yep, it was 2 little people and 1 boy who was, I believe, about 12 at the time, who was born without legs. So any of the scenes where E.T. is kind of walking on his hands is that boy.
Wow, that's so cool.
It's really interesting, and it's kind of neat how they're able to give all of these different roles and different parts and different opportunities to people who have these disadvantages and turning them into advantages for these films.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, like the 3 parts that I would imagine after you say that is like the hands are obviously one person. The neck moving up and down, like the head movements and facial expressions are quite elaborate. Mm-hmm. And then maybe the third guy is just the body, I don't know, or the legs. There has to be some legs, right?
Well, the legs are like the tiny little things.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So they don't really do too much. Even.
Yeah,
like he kind of
waddles.
has that like waddle.
Yeah.
So a couple more things that I was going to point out. So all of the hand motions were done by a mime, a professional mime that they hired, because they found that the kind of the puppeteering and the robotic kind of things just didn't do it did justice.
Yeah. they still did an amazing job then, but like obviously because like those hand movements, they're creepy and like they're very alien. Like you can't tell that it's like humans doing that kind of like it's just a cool way. Like the hands were gross, but they were like they're kind of important and like character driving sort of.
They're very important to the film, and they make it feel more real as well. Like
Yeah.
there isn't very many times where E.T. as a puppet pulls you out of the film.
Yeah.
Honestly, like there are even times when E.T.'s in a bad place where like I've completely forgotten at this point that we're just looking at a puppet, and like this is again a little bit of that emotion kind of boiling up in me and seeing kind of this horrible state that he's in.
Yeah, they really took the time to make him as realistically alien as possible. Like it doesn't have that like again uncanny valley effect where you're like how's this thing working? You're not thinking about that much. You get into the movie and you're just like that's how aliens move.
Yeah, exactly. So the last interesting tidbit about effects and the way that they film this, they actually film this in the chronological order of the events, which if you know kind of how Hollywood works, it's generally kind of they do it in an order where they can kind of film certain scenes and they don't have to go back to the same location to film over again, and it's all kind of based on budget and kind of when things make sense to film versus the chronological order. The reason why they did this is because they wanted to elicit the emotional responses from the kids, because these are actual kid actors at this point. We don't have some 20-year-olds trying to pretend to be like tweens.
Younger.
Basically.
Yeah. The spaceship is kind of horrible. They put everything into ET, and that's completely fair. Like the spaceship, like they're just like it's only in a few shots. Actually, like only the scenes where it's flying away or like in the distance, that's the only point I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Because you actually do get to see inside of it a little bit in the beginning.
Which I didn't remember as
Me
an
either.
adult.
Yeah, I had no idea, like I did not remember that they were coming to collect plants.
No.
Or that like you see inside.
Yeah.
And like yeah, just that the ramp at the end, like that's kind of what I remember. And like him leaving. But I don't remember, the rest of those details.
Yeah, that's really the only part of the special effects that don't hold up for me. And actually, really specific when the ship's coming back down and everyone's kind of standing around on it. You can definitely tell that's like a green screened kind of area, and they've kind of like put them into that, and it was probably some sort of like model kind of spaceship like in Star Wars kind of thing.
Yeah, and the flyaway, and then there's a rainbow in the sky. It wasn't done that well.
Yeah, that part wasn't necessary.
But it wasn't. Yeah, they didn't have to try for that because you had already like they'd invested so much probably in ET.
And I was so emotionally invested at that point. Like you really didn't. Yeah, you didn't need all of that at the end, but they also probably didn't need to try that hard at the end either. Like they tried like with the rainbow and everything, like you said. We probably didn't need that to be completely honest. You mentioned earlier that E.T.'s face was modeled off of some other people, and specifically the famous people that E.T.'s face was modeled off of include Albert Einstein, Ernest Hemingway, and Carl Sandburg.
Did they all like merge in a melting pot?
It was probably a psychedelic trip that Steven Spielberg had in the 70s.
Yeah, it's I see like certain elements that could be attributed to those kind of people, like their faces, but something like wrong happened.
I think when they cross-dress E.T., there's a little bit of Albert Einstein in that there with the hair.
Yeah. It's that's a good scene.
Okay, let's get into a look back at the time. So I don't really want to retread over old ground here. If you kind of want to delve into 1982 and when this movie came out, I'd highly recommend going back to the last episode about The Thing. They came out same time. E.T. came out a few weeks, and completely blew up the box office. This was the largest grossing movie when it came out. It was the highest grossing movie for about 6 weeks, but it stayed in theater for half a year, basically.
Wow.
And it's been re-released twice since then. It held on to the highest growing film until it was surpassed by Jurassic Park in 1993, like I said. This movie was huge. This movie was a moment in time that kind of hit the pop culture at just the right time.
It defined that period, kind of, or like ushered in a new one.
Yeah, exactly. This was kind of the positive answer to the recession and kind of that hard outlook on life that and all of the hardships that people were dealing with at the time. That this kind of, added some magic into people's lives.
Yeah, some awe and wonder a little bit. What's cool too is product placement was kind of this was like one of the first instances, and that kind of changed like that aspect of movies and shows from then on with the Reese's Pieces.
Yeah, they basically exploded because of this movie, and Steven Spielberg actually originally wanted M&Ms, but they didn't accept it. They didn't want to be associated with an alien. They thought it'd be too creepy.
It wasn't just an alien. It was the fact that E.T. looks so weird. I'm pretty sure.
Oh, okay.
Like if it was like a cute, lovable alien, which he does turn out to be, but like all they saw, I feel like, was a picture of E.T. and they're like, no. But that was a big downfall for them because Reese's Pieces just blew up after that, and other products and product companies were trying to get into movies after that because they're like, wow, this is like a untapped marketing area.
And there's so many components of this film too that really cemented it in the history back then and have continued to cement itself in cinematic history. E.T. Phone Home is probably in, if not the top 10, then the top 20 most quoted dialogues of all time, or famous, probably one of the most famous lines of all time. And there's other components to this, like the image of Elliot in E.T. on the bike flying over the moon. Like, that gave me chills watching that as an adult.
Like, I remember it, like, vaguely as I was watching the movie, but all of the references in modern cinema and shows to that scene, just, like, rewatching the original, like, of that scene of the flying bike was just... It was really cool.
Yeah, and that's the first scene of this movie that I really got emotional because that's the point in time that you remember from this movie even after 20 years. Yeah. And so I was just looking up the movie posters while you and I were taking a break, and there's kind of the original one with E.T. and Elliot's kind of fingers touching. And I would say that's not my favorite movie poster of all time, but the alternative one with the bike and the two of them kind of crossing the moon like that, I think on principle alone, eventually, once I have my hallway or my room of movie posters, that has to be on there.
Yeah, that's fair. I didn't even... Like, it happened twice in the movie. I didn't even know that until I rewatched that, where he crosses the sun the second time. Mm-hmm. That was a cool scene, especially with all the other kids, like, following.
Yeah, the final chase scene, and we'll dive into that into the spoilers for sure. But oh man, so the last part of this segment that I want to discuss with you is to kind of contrast that with The Thing. The Thing was the reason why we actually kind of even landed on E.T. for our second episode. Yeah. And E.T. is part of the reason why The Thing didn't do so well and was actually kind of hated when it came out. For me, so after watching these two films kind of back to back, to be honest, I kind of understand.
Yeah.
I could not imagine having watched E.T. first and then gone and seen The Thing.
Yeah, like just like such a good feeling from E.T. and then just a horrible feeling from The Thing.
Yeah, I'm so glad that we did The Thing first. it would have changed my entire outlook on that movie. So if you're gonna watch the two, watch The Thing first or watch them far enough apart. You should not have a double feature night starting with E.T. into The Thing. It's just they're so polar opposite.
Yeah, yeah.
That and there's the payoffs are both there. There are some big payoffs in each movie, but they're so drastically different.
Yeah, like the payoffs in ET are often like heartwarming or funny and like enjoyable. But yeah, in The Thing, it's just the grotesque like practical effects were just so different. And like ET is a little grotesque but in a cute way.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, let's get into our personal reviews, then we'll talk about what our partners found with this movie. I'll start. So for me, this is truly a magical movie, and like I said at the beginning, this is one of those movies that kickstarted my passion for cinema. Like this is the movie that I shared with my grandma growing up in those kind of really important years. And actually that was the last kind of sentence that I wrote down as this movie was kind of wrapping up was what a truly wonderful movie. And like I said, I got emotional twice during it, and for me, this film really transcends the medium in which it's presented. It's kind of the same vibes that you'd get from the Toy Story series, where it just becomes so important to your childhood and beyond that, but then reflecting back on those times. And I think that's part of why this film is held up for so long, because it can put you back in that space. And even someone like my partner who didn't have those same fond experiences with this movie as a kid was able to kind of still feel that now watching that as an adult.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And the last kind of thing with that as well is I personally think this is a film that you show your kids one day. And part of it is because this is a children's movie, but this is something, again, where later on in their life, they can watch this and think back to their childhood and the fond memories had and that they shared with you. So I'm really grateful for the personal kind of sentiment that I have with this movie and the memories that I have with my grandma watching this together.
Yeah, no doubt. That's a great idea to like make sure you like watch this with your kids, and then they might have the same experience we had, and then they'll watch it again in like 40 years or something, because they'll be like 20 something then. And
your math is on point.
well, well, yeah, I guess it's not gonna be 20 years till we have whatever, but like it's a cool thing for kids to experience like twice at two different points in their life.
Yeah, exactly. This is one of those movies that I would call a generational movie, that there are pieces of this that really stick with you as a kid, but then as an adult, it just kind of hits different. And there are other parts to this movie that you don't really understand until you're more in the mom's point of view than you are in the kids.
Yeah, yeah, and that was something cool about the actual filming too, is that they filmed a lot of it from like a kid's height on purpose, so that you like the kids really connect with it, and then the adults kind of get back into that mind frame and can appreciate that and look back on it with like some good feelings.
Everything about it just really puts you back into that childhood mindset. And I can't even, like I said, Toy Story's the closest kind of comparison that I can make. And especially Toy Story does it a little bit different, but think of like Toy Story 1 and Toy Story 3 combined in one movie, basically.
Yeah, yeah, it's a good idea of the feeling that's kind of left with viewing this.
So do you want to talk about your own experience?
Yeah. Overall, this movie was just great to watch again. The feelings from like childhood and everything were there, and the nostalgia from the soundtrack, and like my once fear of ET, and now he's like it's a fun movie, and he's a fun character once you like watch it as an adult. So overall, great movie. I There were so many funny scenes, and like so many scenes that really draw you in and like make you love the characters,
Mhm.
and great feelings reminding you of childhood.
It just hits different on an emotional level that a lot of other children's movies don't really do. Like, most children's movies are there to entertain a child, where this is trying to capture the feeling of being a
Yeah,
child.
yeah, it's that experience. Like it's kind of like a becoming your own person experience from Elliot's perspective, where at the beginning of the movie he was like just trying to get a word in edgewise with his older brothers, and throughout the movie he gets to like really open up and become himself through this connection with ET. And like there's the classroom scene where like he kisses the girl and really like kind of starts his own personality, like kickstarts his own like the rest of his life, kind of like this was a pivotal moment.
Mhm.
And as you're watching this, as like looking back at that perspective of what a kid wants at that time, every kid like back then, you're like trying to figure out who you are, and this was just a great way to have that. Like Elliot had that little push to like he had to become who he was gonna become with his experiences with ET.
Yeah, you make some really great points there. And the one that I kind of want to dig into a little bit, because it's another thought that I had, was basically like from the kid's perspective, his priorities. And that's something that I wrote down during my watch through here, was that especially when E.T. and Elliot are first kind of interacting, and Elliot is trying to basically show E.T. what being a human means, and
Yeah,
what's important to know. And it's like, here's my Lando Calrissian
yeah,
toy, here's my fish,
yeah,
and all of this sort of stuff that's really important to a child, but as an adult you wouldn't think to maybe present at first.
yeah. Like he was just showing him all his favorite things, and he just got so into it. The kid, as like the actor, did absolutely amazing. And he just really nailed that experience for kids where they're like, this is my favorite stuff. Like these are important things that you should know.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, super cool scene, and it just captured that like childlike innocence, or yeah, just perfectly.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so partner factor here. I watched this with my partner Jess. As I said, this was not the same kind of childhood movie that or experience with this movie that I had. She was scared of ET as a child. She wasn't looking forward to watching this with me. She was kind of taking some jabs at the movie, taking some jabs at me. Can't believe that you're going to make me watch this movie. This is the movie that terrified me as a kid. But she liked the film more than she was willing to admit. Like I said, she had her laptop open. She was watching hockey while I had this on, but she had her head up more than probably 50% of the time. And in the
Nice.
last act of the movie, I would say it was 75 to 95% of the time she was up. The game ended, and she stayed there for the last 15 minutes and watch the rest of the movie instead of going to bed.
Nice.
And like I said, that last kind of quote that she had, where this movie really captures the feeling of being a child.
Yeah, yeah, they did such a good job with that. Yeah, Annabelle was like the last thought after watching it was that's not as bad as I thought. When you think back and like you had those like hazy memories of what ET was, and then you're like it can't like be that good anymore. Like it was like so old and so long ago that we watched it first. We both talked about how like what age we were when we last watched it, and it had to be in the 90s. Yeah, so not as bad as I thought. Like she was really getting into it, asking questions and like pointing things out, and yeah, overall, I think she really did enjoy it. She paid attention the whole time and was, yeah, asking those questions.
Yeah, I think personally, I would recommend this film to just about any adult who, regardless of what experience you had with this as a kid, just try it out, watch it again, and see the difference that it makes watching it as an adult. Okay, let's talk sequels, prequels, and reboots. There has never been a sequel to this movie, which is fascinating if you think about how Hollywood works.
Yeah.
The highest grossing movie of all time for a 10-year span, over 10 years, and the Hollywood studios weren't trying to push out and pump out some sequels, get people back in the theaters to watch this. And so the reason why that never happened was actually Spielberg and Matheson, the writer, had actually did begin writing a sequel when this movie was released, and they realized how much of an impact this was going to have on the generation, but also the numbers of how many people were going there.
Yeah.
I think I read that there was something like 120 million tickets sold in the US alone.
Wow.
So they ended up deciding against pursuing it, and Spielberg's actual quote here is that it would do nothing but rob the original of its virginity. E.T. is not about going back to the planet. So I'm so happy that, and I think this takes the kind of director that Steven Spielberg is. We have a handful of these kind of directors that have that kind of clout and that reliability, like a Chris Nolan or a Quentin Tarantino, a Stanley Kubrick, those kind of directors that you know are going to put out quality movies, and you don't have to rely on the franchises that are just going to get people into there to see what their favorite characters are going to do next, regardless of the quality of everything being inputted into that movie, writing, etc. So the other component to this that I wanted to tell you about was that there was a video game that was produced by Atari right
no
when this
way.
movie was generated. It was rushed for the holidays. They developed and released this game within 5 weeks of start to finish.
Wow.
It was known as one of the worst video games ever made, and it actually caused a crash of video games in 1983. So one of the greatest movies of all time caused video games to crash and probably go backwards for a few years. There was probably a few years where game design and development was at a standstill. So there was a legend way back then, before the internet as well, because again, this is before the internet, that thousands or millions of copies of this game was buried in the New Mexico desert.
Oh, I heard about that. That's awesome.
So back in 2014, there was a group of investigators that decided to actually look into whether this was true, and they found them.
No way.
They did, yeah.
Really?
So I couldn't find online how many actual copies were buried there, but it would have had to have been in the thousands. I can't imagine it getting to 1 million, but
I wonder if there are any surviving copies that are like playable.
Oh, I gotta imagine there are. My mom has her Atari still.
That's unreal.
Yeah, I actually, probably about 5 years ago when I was back at home from university, I found it down in our crawl space, and I actually bought a bunch of parts online and got it back up and running again.
That's unreal. Cool. Yeah, that's a cool experience.
Yeah.
I just pulled up the picture of the video game, and like the 8-bit pixel of ET is just so accurate. But like, how did they mess up the game so bad?
I have no idea. We have to get a copy of this.
Yeah, we really should. Yeah, so like it's crazy that it was like such like the spike of how high the movie went to how low the video game went. That's pretty funny.
It's pretty funny, yeah. And then, like I said, there's some crossover with the Star Wars movies. We've talked about that, and Steven Spielberg and George Lucas's relationship. And we're absolutely going to have to delve into that a little bit later in our series when we get to the Star Wars movies.
Oh, definitely.
So, So even though there isn't really any sequels or prequels to watch with this film, I think that this film had a larger impact on cinema in general than even maybe we think about on a regular basis. Like, I don't think a TV show like Stranger Things would be the same without an ET.
I think Twilight Zone and other things also influence that, but having ET bring that out of nerd culture and kind of into the mainstream, it had absolutely massive mainstream approval. So the fact that it brought that into mainstream instead of just being like a nerd thing probably did allow Stranger Things and things like that to be made as well. So that makes sense.
Well, and even think about it. Like, this is an alien movie with a focus on children. The concept of aliens was a more adult concept, and it's also kind of one of the quintessential childhood adventure stories, really.
Yeah, like if you're thinking about kids and aliens, there's not that much like pre 2000s that I can
No.
think of really. There's like post is Wally, which has to be modeled like the robot has to be modeled after ET to a certain degree, right?
Yeah, maybe. Like, the face is kind of a similar shape. Like, the
Yeah.
picture of the eyes that I'm picturing.
Yeah, because he has kind of like the same like binocular shaped head
Yeah, right.
and like a stubby little body. So,
I wonder if as well a movie like this would have brought something like Peter Pan back into the fold a little bit, because this is, like I said, there's a lot of comparisons drawn between this and Peter Pan, and to have the book be in the movie, obviously there's definitely some inspiration that Steven Spielberg pulled from this. So I actually was thinking about Hook.
yeah, exactly. Hook. That's what I was gonna say because that's Steven Spielberg as well.
Right.
Like if you didn't include Peter Pan in E.T., would you have done Hook? Like
Yeah.
that might yeah, that's a cool connection as well.
Yeah, so that's kind of the thing is I almost wanted to watch Hook next after
Yeah.
watching this, but I feel like we need to switch it up a little bit.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
so you've actually kind of been thinking a little bit about what we're going to watch next. I'm going to put you on the spot to pick a movie right now that we're going to watch on the next episode.
Maybe Lawrence of Arabia. I mean Arabia. That sounds pretty good. And The Crow, maybe. And there was that one other one that was pretty interesting looking.
Oh,
But
the final Stanley Kubrick film.
yeah, the
Eyes Wide Shut.
Eyes Wide Shut. Yeah, that would be a pretty cool like area to go to because I've heard that phrase all the time, and I know that it's a big like movie from the period that we're looking at, but I don't know that much about it.
I
And
don't
like
know. I'm a huge Stanley Kubrick fan, and I believe that's the only film of his that I have left. It might be one of three that I haven't watched yet. So honestly, I'm excited and open to watching any one of those three. So tell the viewers right now, what are we doing next?
I think Eyes Wide Shut. That
All right,
sounds
let's do
sounds
it.
pretty damn fun.
I'm excited for
Yeah,
it.
yeah, because we're going into this in the same way that some of our listeners would be going into most of our movies, or we're going into it not having previously watched it or knowing that much about it. So this is a cool like some people may have heard of The Thing. Everyone heard about or watched E.T. and it's worth a watch again. But this one is like a very much unheard of. Or no, it's not unheard of, but in our generation, I feel like I've never heard someone else talk about it.
I mean, this will be the third movie that we'll be doing, and think of how different the experience is, and what we're bringing to the movies, and what the movies are going to be bringing to us, and what they mean to us. How different they are,
Yeah.
and how different each of these experiences is going to be. That's really exciting, and I think that we're going to continue to see that with all of these movies that we continue to watch. Like, each things are going to bring different things to the table, and are each are going to have their own special meaning to us or to you as the viewers. There might be more important components to each of these movies that really speak to you. So
Definitely.
Okay, so I think at this point in time, that's a pretty good wrap up. So I think we're gonna get into some spoilers again.
Yeah.
So if you've never watched ET or you want to watch ET, rewatch ET as an adult, now's the time to pause the podcast and go and check that out. And then come back and hang out and talk spoilers with us.
Yeah, definitely. That was such a great movie. Go watch it.
Yeah.
It was just a really nostalgic experience overall.
Absolutely.
You'll enjoy it.
If you twisted my arm and said, if I had to watch one of the two movies from the current episodes that you guys have presented to us, I would say, by all means, you need to see E.T. over The Thing.
Yeah, it's very fun, very within the culture that you've experienced. It's in references all the time, so it'll be very relevant for you if you want to go like more experimental and try like getting into the mindset of older movies and what they bring to the cinematic experience. Maybe The Thing would be good for you.
Absolutely. Okay, it's time for spoilers. I'm looking
Yes.
forward to this. Where do you want to start? I have so many comments here that I want to dive into.
Maybe just favorite scenes.
Okay, sure. Let's do favorite scenes. So, I mean, I'm gonna go to the end and then we can work through the rest of it. But the scene with the last chase with the kids on the bike and everything, like that is pure magic. And like I said, Steven Spielberg edited it to match this music at that point in time. And when they lift off over the police, like that was the most emotional part of the movie for me. And part of it was the excitement of it all. Part of it was the fact that, you know, like things were gonna go right. And the last kind of component to it was that it really feels like we're getting to the end of the movie. And I honestly, I wasn't ready to leave this world yet.
Like E.T.
Yeah,
No,
exactly.
well, he was ready at a certain point. He was very ready.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's like that end scene just flowed so well, and yeah, like it left everybody off with such a good feeling. The excitement of the chase, and then the end where everyone's saying goodbye, and like each said goodbye in their different way, and Gertie's goodbye was amazing. Like,
What did she say again?
I don't remember what she said specifically, but E.T. was like, "Be good."
Be good.
Yeah, because she previously had said that.
That
in
was
the
their
movie.
first line together. That
Yeah,
was his
yeah.
first English, and she taught him that.
Yeah, well, it was from watching a show too. I think I didn't.
Yes,
catch that.
and that was the scene where Gertie almost ratted the boys out. And again, this is connecting to my childhood, where I had the younger sister who would always go and tell mom and dad on us and all the stupid shit that we did, basically.
yeah.
And so I really connected to that. And then when she's sitting there at the TV and going, "Be good," and he's like poking his head over the TV and going,
yeah,
like,
be good.
"Be good."
Yeah.
Oh man. So kind of taking a step back, the reason why the bike scene and them flying over the police like had as much impact as it did is because 10 minutes before that, E.T. was dead.
Yeah,
And this is the darkest part of the movie is the whole kind of quarantine scene, and that's a frightening scene with the astronauts coming in. Like that's
yeah.
So the astronauts, pure cool factor. There's no way.
No reason for it.
There's
It
no
doesn't
reason
make
for
any
it.
sense. Yeah,
It's such a visually like mind-blowing scene because I think you could almost like, I had a thought of like, did E.T. put the house in space? Like,
Yeah,
what is these
yeah.
astronauts doing here?
Yeah.
They wouldn't have had those. They would have
No,
been hazmat suits.
that's exactly what I wrote down. I was like, why the spacesuits, not hazmat? And then that's when the doctor with the mustache showed up. The mustache, the primo mustache.
Jason has a mustache fixation,
Yeah.
but in all fairness, he can grow a very good mustache.
I miss my mustache. But yeah, right beside my note, I wrote doctor's mustache, and then Gertie is so awesome.
I feel like if anybody read our notes for this film, they'd be like, "What is going on?" Like, I'm all over the place.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I'm having just a lot of fun watching this. There's so many just like little moments that at the moment I was like, that's amazing. So
Yeah, yeah.
but yeah, so the dark thing with ET dying there under the careful kind of watch of all the doctors trying to save him and everything. And the kids are screaming like ET don't
Yeah,
die
yeah.
like
Like, you're killing him. You're
yeah,
killing him. Yeah,
like that's frightening as a kid. Like
yeah,
up to this point, a lot of kids haven't really experienced death,
yeah,
and this is where you're gonna have to hold their hand and say like it's gonna be okay. Like it's just relax. It's gonna be
yeah.
okay. Like just keep watching, and it's like 10 minutes of ET dead there. Like they really draw it out.
Yeah, I think just like the intensity of it makes it seem longer, but I don't think it was that long. But like he was definitely like hurting for a while because maybe the environment's not right for him or whatever. Like over the period of him like losing his like life force or whatever.
So there's a few theories to that. Like I could see, being on a foreign planet, maybe it's the connection that he shares with his species. I kind of wonder about that a little bit as one of his powers.
Yeah, because when you very first are introduced to the aliens overall, you see a group of them foraging for plant species to take home with them.
Mhm.
And they hear a sound, and all of their bodies light up at the same time. So it's like they're all like connected and bonded, just like E.T. and Elliot.
ET's bond with Elliot is ET bringing Elliot into his world, basically.
Yeah.
While Elliot's sharing his world with ET, ET in his own way shares his world and his connection with Elliot.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's also kind of why ET's able to regenerate and kind of bounce back is he feels the connection of his family coming to get him.
Yeah, because like as soon as he comes back to life, so the reason he came back to life was that potentially it was because the aliens, like his family, was coming back, but it's exactly when Elliot says "I love you." So like it's like a fully like formed bond and connection, and
Yeah.
it's like he gave him just enough to come back, and then as soon as he comes back, he regrows the dying plant that was close by.
Oh man, what a magical movie.
Yeah. In the bike chase, did you notice how there were definitely adults riding those bikes?
Oh, absolutely.
Like,
I thought that as well. I was like Elliot grew like a foot.
yeah. Like obviously they had to do their best and like they did a decent job, but like they were pros first of all. Like
Yeah.
But yeah.
I mean,
and
I could have done some of those moves back in the day.
back in the day, yeah. Yeah, it was overall very good, and his the older brother's friends were like a cool little spice throughout the movie. Like
Yeah, they were.
the little interactions they had with.
They had some cool personality.
Yeah, so in the very first scene, when they're all playing Dungeons and Dragons, was one of them smoking? Or was that the mom? Because there's like
The
I
mom
was like
was definitely smoking. I don't know that I noticed any of the other kids.
okay,
because
because like there was like smoke drifting up in the middle of the table, and I was like, are these kids smoking? Like how far back and like how bad was the '80s really? Like
yeah, I mean they're probably around 15, right? Like they're in probably
13,
junior
14?
high.
Yeah.
Because and Michael's playing football, right? Like we see Michael in his
True,
football
yeah.
gear. He's
Like
just
grade
about
9.
he's
Yeah.
just about at the point where he's gonna start driving because he backs up the car.
Yeah.
And so like there's that great line of I only know how to back up.
yeah.
Yeah, actually, that was one interesting thing that I noticed also during that scene. I actually noticed a continuity error, and it kind of racked my brain a little bit. And I looked it up later, and I was right that the whole ordering of the pizza, they
Yeah.
show them all order pizza and everything happens, and they tell Elliot to go pay for it, but then they also tell Elliot to go like order it, and they want this and that on it. And everything else.
Okay, yeah. Like that scene seemed a little bit funny, but I was just like watching the interactions and like how people were interacting. I didn't catch that. That's cool.
Yeah, it's something that I caught and then looked it up and I was correct. The other thing with the pizza, the only other like unrealistic component to this part is they leave the pizza. A bunch of teenage boys
Yeah.
leave a pizza outside. I
Yeah.
guarantee I'm eating that pizza.
Oh
still.
yeah, like a bunch of the toppings were stuck to the cardboard, but they wouldn't care.
You're scraping it off. It's all
Yeah.
the same. It's
Yeah,
all
and
going.
they weren't even supposed to order the pizza. The mom was upset. That was pretty cool.
So leading into this as well, there's the scene when they meet up at the park, and this is another one of those great lines where Elliot says he's a man from outer space and we're taking him to his spaceship. And the one of the kids goes, "Can he just beam up?"
Yeah. So
Elliot goes, "This is reality, Greg."
yeah. That was a great little interaction. That was a great line.
Just Elliot, each of those lines, he just hit them so perfectly.
Yeah. Oh, and like the surprising use of foul language. Like I wasn't expecting him. What did he say? Like I know he said douchebag, or like douchebag was thrown around a
the
few
greatest movie insult of all time.
Yes.
Shut up, penis breath.
Yeah. And like that was like one of the that was like fairly early in the movie, and I was just not expecting that. Like they got a 10-year-old kid to say this in like that's in one of the biggest kids movies.
That's
like,
such a fantastic insult too.
Yeah. That's like if like Buzz Lightyear said that, like you'd have kids quoting it all the time.
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
I can't believe I didn't quote that growing up.
Yeah, really.
It never stuck, but that's such a good chirp.
Yeah.
The scene where Elliot and E.T., like where Elliot gets E.T. to come up into his room with him and kind of shows him everything and starts teaching E.T. about all of the important things as his kid, that put a really dumb smile on my face.
Yeah,
like that really meant a lot to me.
Me too. Like every kid has like all their favorite stuff. It's like you go over to your like nephew's house or like someone's house, and they're like, "Look what I got," and like you're like, I kind of remember feeling that way. Like,
Yeah.
Like I still can get that way. Like we get about movies almost.
You and I are just very passionate people, and our passions drive us. And so I think we both feel a connection to Elliot there.
Yeah. And it was just like so pure. It was like, did
So
they
pure.
actually bring the actor's own toys in, and like he's like showing them for the first time to someone new? Like they nailed that scene.
Absolutely. Another funny scene that I thought of was the scene where they release the frogs. There's
Yes.
two parts to this I want to talk about. First, just the fact that they release all the frogs and Elliot's like screaming like, "Back to the river!"
Yeah. Like be free and all that. Yeah. I wrote down, I was like, did they really like just chloroform frogs in front of like did they
They're 10 years old!
Yeah, they're 10 years old, and they're putting cotton balls of chloroform in jars with these frogs, and it's like, did this happen in the 80s, or was this just for the movie? And like, did the chloroform kill the frog? Like, were they poisoning it to death in that scene? Like, it was just crazy.
This is one of those moments where I think we have to ask the older viewers who grew up in the 70s and 80s, like, did this actually happen back then? Because there's no way that in the early 2000s, when we would have been that age, that they would have allowed us to do that.
They don't let kids dissect frogs at that age anymore. Like, how far back do you go? And you got like kindergartners do it, but like, yeah, the fact that they were doing it, it was just such a like interesting scene.
Yeah. Back to the river! So the other part of this scene is again, so there's a lot of points throughout this movie, and I wrote this early on when I noticed that E.T. and Elliot both fell asleep at the same time, that they showed that bond actually really early. The other part that I would have never noticed as a kid, and like I said, this is a great movie to rewatch and see all these points, is E.T. getting hammered alone at home.
Yes.
And sharing that bond with Elliot, who gets just hammered. A 10-year-old kid being drunk at school.
Yeah. And like he like burps when like after he has like the first beer, and like looks over at his crush potential, like the girl in class, and like she looks at him weird, and then he's just like smitten. The ET drinking scene was a really fun, like the dog following ET around,
Yeah.
like that.
E.T. in the like house coat,
Yeah,
like
yeah. He's in a house coat drinking beers, and like the dog's following him around, and like it was like very wary of him at first. Two movies in a row where dogs are kind of like peppered in. Dogs are a huge thing in movies. Like they can
yeah.
symbolize a lot of different things, and like one of the main things is they show who's the good guy and stuff like that. But in
Yeah.
this in this movie, it was just like a fun little addition
Hmm.
where the dog is just like actually interacting with the puppet of ET in real life, and it's just like so funny to watch a dog like going through that.
We see the dog's first interaction, and him and E.T. just terrified of each other, into E.T. again just kind of becoming one of the family with the
Yeah,
dog.
yeah, yeah.
And that's kind of the thing, is E.T. is like almost the equivalent of the dog to the kids,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
I don't know if there's too many other specific kind of really many things that I really want to dive into. It's just there's just so many moments of this that just really feel like childhood, like the faking being sick, like it's almost a lead into a Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Like there's the I'm keeping him
Yeah,
moment.
yeah, yeah.
So there's just so many little parts throughout this movie that just remind me of what being a kid is all about.
Yeah. And the ET actually going home
Mhm.
like at the end, that might be one of the best hugs in cinema. Like up
Yeah.
I don't know, like overall maybe, but like it's got to be up there cuz like the yeah, like the goodbye scene
And it's just so heartwarming where he's like, I'll always be right here.
yeah,
Like,
yeah, that's
oh
exactly
my
what I
god.
had written down. I'll be right here.
Because they don't want to leave each other because
Because
he's
they've
like,
connected
stay,
yeah, yeah, he's like stay and
and
he's
he's
like
like, come.
come. Yeah, yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Yeah, just everything about this movie is so heartwarming and special.
And like I want to there has to be a YouTube compilation of just Gertie's lines, and I want to watch that
Yeah.
after we talk about this.
Oh
We have to
man.
get like a soundboard that we can like program and just like play certain lines from things. That would be unreal for this.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a lot of editing on my part, and I already spent about 6 hours of editing.
No, we just
per
get it on
episode.
the laptop and play it into the speaker. I don't know. We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Potentially maybe. The ouch scene and like just like him starting to talk. Oh, and we didn't even talk about his phone.
Oh yeah, how did we not talk about ET phone home? We did talk about the line, but we didn't talk about all of kind of everything about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I liked that. Like I remember ET phone home, but he was like at first he was like home phone, and like things like that. Like he
So
was saying
so when that
different
first
lines.
happened, I was like, "Oh my god, is this like a Luke I am your father situation?"
Yeah, yeah,
where
yeah.
everybody remembers the line wrong.
Yeah.
But no, eventually Gertie
He-
trains him to say it properly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That yeah, I was thinking the exact same thing.
This film is probably the high point of home phones in cinema. Like
Yeah,
it's all
yeah.
downhill from here. We're
Yeah.
moving into cell phone territory.
Yeah. Except for like maybe Scream and their
Ooh,
their
good
home
point,
phones.
Good
Yeah.
point. Another Drew Barrymore.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's a very famous scene with her as well.
Yeah.
This is one of Drew Barrymore's. It's not her first, but it's one of her earliest roles. I mean, it's got to be one of the largest of her career still to this day, even with all of the long storied history of all of her special roles. This one truly means something.
Yeah, yeah. Like just like how is she so good as a kid? Like she just nailed everything in that.
So I was actually just reading right before we started that she really took to heart that ET was real and there,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
so that's kind of that thing where it's that special connection. And again, with having the puppets and not having the crutch of CGI when things are right there,
Yeah.
it's just so much easier to lean into it.
Especially for her at that age, like it makes sense that she would have gotten as like enraptured by ET in real life as like we all did with the movie.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think at different points in your life, you might be able to connect with different characters. but I think there will always be something special about her portrayal of this
Oh
character.
yeah, yeah.
I think that's everything I have.
Oh no, the actual phone that he builds is really cool. Like he just starts taking apart different things, and then
Mhm.
the kids start to figure out that, oh, he's trying to make a phone. He takes apart one of those little alphabet things.
Yeah.
And I just found out, I was just looking this up, that the phone actually worked as a communicated, like it could communicate things.
Really, with the umbrella and everything at that point in
Yeah,
time?
yeah, and
Wow.
the saw blade and
Oh!
yeah. So yeah, like the saw blade did actually move the fork, and it made the words come up on the alphabet
Oh, wow.
toy. So like they actually got a language and like a language person to build this.
Somebody MacGyvered this
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, I want to find that again. Yeah, ET's communicator actually worked and was constructed by Henry Feinberg, an expert in science and technology interpretation for the public. So, yeah, a guy came in just to build this communicator that actually worked. And it was just like, it was really cool that like ET's just so smart that you could pull things together and like direct that back home and send that message.
Yeah, it's pretty neat.
Because like every kid wants to like pull things apart and like build something that actually works. It never works. Like me and my brother used to like pull things
Yeah.
apart. We cut up like headphone wires and tried to make like electricity go between it, but that's not how that works. So like we were like, like we can't just build something like this. So it's cool to see it from like a kid's perspective, that you can build something and it works, and it's like ET did it.
I wonder if that had an effect on me as well, because I was similar. Like I had that same kind of curiosity about things. Like, can I take this apart? What's inside of it?
Yeah.
How does it work? What does it do? What can I put it back together again? Can I make it different or better?
Yeah, yeah.
It was always a no. It's
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
broken at this point,
Yeah.
but it was
But it was
worth
a fun.
shot.
It's a fun process that like so that's just another element of childhood that is portrayed well
Yes.
and nostalgic to watch over again.
Oh, yeah. The nostalgia towards your childhood in this is unmatched.
Yeah. Oh, there's another reference that I came across, and it was Poltergeist. Have you seen it?
I have not seen Poltergeist yet.
That has I told my boss, who's like born in the 80s, like 84, and he suggested Poltergeist, and then I just like came across this fact that Spielberg had an original concept for a much darker movie in which a family was terrorized by aliens. Then so he kind of split that in two, similar to Quentin Tarantino's Reservoir Dogs and that other movie, the other
Pulp Fiction?
yeah, Pulp Fiction. So Pulp Fiction is made of three stories, right?
Right.
And then there were supposed to be three writers who would each write one of those. Quentin Tarantino was one of them, and then
Interesting.
he had two other friends who were also supposed to write a part.
Huh.
The third guy didn't write his part, so Quentin had to write it. But upon writing it, he wrote Reservoir Dogs, and he's like, this has to be a full other movie. So he then made Reservoir Dogs first, and then wrote a fourth part for Pulp Fiction, and he combined three stories into Pulp Fiction. So the similar thing happened with E.T. and Poltergeist, where Steven Spielberg had an idea and he split it into a benevolent alien story, and we got E.T., and then a dark alien story, and we got Poltergeist.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll have to watch that at some point because there's so much backstory to that film that I'd really love to dive into that one sometime.
Yeah, we'll have to like create a link to this at some point in the future and watch
Yes.
that. Yeah. Where would you say this was filmed? Was it? I'm pretty sure it was California, and like everything was like felt very California-esque. It was very flat, like the cityscape and everything.
Yeah, I looked that up. It was filmed in California, Los Angeles County, and San Fernando Valley.
Okay, yeah, because there are certain scenes where it's very hilly and certain scenes where it's very flat. No, this is just random. An old movie that Old Yeller. Do you remember watching that as a kid?
I don't vividly, but I remember the gist of Old Yeller.
Yeah, yeah. Like that's just another like similar vibe
Yeah.
as this one.
It's just because, again, E.T. becomes a part of the family, but it's a closer feeling to like a pet, really.
For some of them, like for
Yeah.
well, yeah, yeah, yeah. That's actually very accurate for most of them. It's just like Elliot and ET are like really meshed together
Yes.
emotionally because of the like how ET works as an alien.
And that's kind of, again, bringing back up the death scene. Like, it's their first experience with death, like you would experience with the death of an animal or
Yeah.
a pet, and it's hard. And as a kid, you just don't understand. Like Gertie says, I wish he was still alive.
Yeah, yeah. She gets it and doesn't, but
Yeah.
like she and like that's the struggle for that experience really is yeah, your first experience. So like as a like yeah, we were way too young to be watching
Oh
this.
my god.
But like it was like we were Gertie's age or something, but
Yeah.
we couldn't appreciate everything else within the movie. Like
Yeah.
all the like the funny scenes and like we probably laughed our asses off at certain scenes, but like the impression that it left was like I was like very apprehensive about ever watching it again during my childhood because it frightened me.
And that's
He was
part of
just he was just gross looking.
and that's part of the beauty of being able to do this is we kind of can go back to the movies that made us too, or the
Yeah.
movies that terrified us,
Yeah, yeah.
and look at them with a fresh set of eyes and,
Yeah.
and under the microscope a little bit.
Yeah, and like really it's just great to watch old movies so that you can appreciate a different perspective because if you're just used to all these 2000s movies and like everything's we've talked about this before where everything's just hammered into you, you don't have to think that much. Like they're just like when you're watching like Marvel and stuff, everything is just it's like you're a dumb audience.
Yes, there's a lot of hand holding for the
Yeah.
audience
Yeah,
there.
this stuff like it was genuine.
And there's open-ended questions in these films that don't need to be answered, that know that the audience doesn't need the answers to every question.
Yeah, yeah.
And it doesn't mean that they're plot holes necessarily. It's just it's not necessary for us as an audience to know or understand everything.
Yeah, and E.T. had a great ending. Like
Yes.
it left you like imagine walking out of the theater.
Oh,
Like that would be such a fun time. It's like that's equivalent to walking out of Star Wars, which I
Yeah.
wish we could have experienced.
it's that childhood wonder again, but even like last night, I had that special takeaway from this film that it left me almost speechless basically for 5 minutes
Yeah,
afterwards.
yeah. This might get cut, but like I want to if I get like absolutely mega rich, I want to have like a movie room and I want to have the exit from the like from the theater. Like like I'm just going to have like a I'm going to hire actors or something and just have the walkout experience after
Yeah.
watching a movie with like my family and friends, so like we could watch one of these old movies and then like have that experience of leaving the theater because that's kind of like what that's kind of the feeling that we want to express to people who are listening is that that feeling of like walking out of a movie theater with your friends and
Yes.
just being like, oh, remember that one part, like that was so good.
Yes.
Like that exact feeling is kind of what we're talking about.
Yeah, and there's really two parts to this podcast, and part of it is kind of sharing these older films with people, but part of it is sharing our experience with them
Yeah.
a little bit and trying to rediscover that feeling and that enjoyment for film.
Yeah, yeah. It's very, very like characteristic of us to like we have to like research everything after like we want to know like what else came out that year and stuff and just the small details. The experience of a movie doesn't end when the movie ends,
Yes.
and it carries out on that walk out, and that walk out is kind of like where we do some research and stuff.
Yeah, and we deconstruct what happened and decompress a bit. One of the more recent films that you could compare that experience with is Joker. Joker at the end,
Yeah.
like, I don't know anyone who walked out of that movie and didn't have an hour discussion afterwards
Yeah,
about what
yeah.
happened and the way that it made you feel. Very different feeling than this, obviously, and how it reflected the times and the sentiment and the problems going on at the time and everything else. All right, I think it's time to wrap it up. We've been talking for a long time.
We should have just like random random things that we talk about like just
Oh,
like at the very
yeah,
like we'll have some.
absolutely.
But something that I missed, I wish I was able to reference in the last discussion was what was that movie that just recently came out where aliens kind of take over a certain part of like America or something. It's all blocked off, and anything that goes in doesn't really come out. And then we follow this chick in.
Oh, you're talking about Annihilation.
Annihilation. Yes. That bear scream.
Oh.
That like it. I think it won an award. That bear scream or something like that. Like the
you're right.
the effects
I
and
remember
stuff.
something like that.
That reminded me like whoever created that whole idea had to be like thinking about The Thing.
Yes.
Like they got their influence from The Thing. They felt like
Oh,
yeah.
it's just such a haunting scream. And
Yeah.
the whole and that wasn't in the book. I've read the book and the book is so different from the film. And so
And they still kicked ass with the film.
oh, yeah.
Like movies that are different than their books in a positive way, it's rare.
So hit or miss.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
hit or miss.
Yeah.
That would have been a very hard novel to adopt, to be honest. It's a difficult read. I didn't love the book the way that I loved the movie.
Yeah. And that's like that's similar to Fight Club. Like Fight Club is close to like the book and the movie are fairly close. There's certain scenes that are somewhat better in the book. Like Marla's like the things that Marla says during sex. She's just way more brutal in the book because Chuck Palahniuk is like messed up in the head, basically.
He writes some very graphic stuff. I've read a few of his novels, and another good reference here is The Shining. Like, think about how different The Shining is from the novel to the film. I haven't even read the novel, but
Me either.
it's famously Stephen King's like most hated adoption or adaptation. Sorry,
Yeah.
that he's famously spoken out against. That he just absolutely hates what Stanley Kubrick did to his novel.
Which is crazy. Like,
it's a masterpiece.
Yeah, I would love to read the novel just to see like which one's really better.
Yeah.
Another one, the first version of it, the first movie, like the '90s version.
The miniseries.
No, that's The Stand.
No. It's a miniseries.
Really?
Yeah.
I watched it in 2 parts.
Yeah,
like,
it's long.
Yeah. So I watched it all in one go, actually, I think. But I didn't know it was a miniseries. It was just like one stream or something
Yeah,
like
it's
that.
3 hours and 12 minutes, so probably about 4 episodes.
Wow, okay. So I watched that thinking it was one movie, and I just sat there and watched the whole thing. It was great. But the second one was just so much better.
Yeah.
Like the modern one, they actually kicked ass with that. And compared to the book,
Yes, the modern adaptation is much better. They still struggle a bit with the adults in the second part, and it's just harder to write horror with adults, I think, especially understanding it and how it preys on its victims.
Yeah. Anyways, we could keep going forever.
Yeah. We should wrap this up.
Yeah.
We're way over on time. So thank you for joining us on Vintage Cinema Rewind. I can't wait to see the comments on this one. Give us feedback. Tell us something we missed about the film. We're going to be watching Eyes Wide Shut. I can't wait to experience that for the first time with you, Jason.
I'm really looking forward to that as well. And yeah, this was a great episode. Fun filming it. Or recording it and fun watching the movie. Overall, amazing experience.
Absolute blast. All right, until next time, have a good one.
Yeah, have a good one, boys. I don't know why I said boys. Cut that out.
Did I talk about where this movie is actually streaming? I don't think I did.
No, you didn't.
Okay.
God damn.
So this film is streaming currently on Prime. Again, if you need to look later, if you're watching this at a later point in time, go down to the link in the description below and you'll be able to find where to stream this. I'm just going to cut that into earlier.
Yeah, yeah.